People who married crazy. What was the last straw that made you say f? After hiding in the karaoke bar bathroom for 30 minutes, she came to me in tears because the guy she had been trying to cheat on me with turned her down. She was expecting sympathy. I told her what she did was unforgivable, said goodbye to my friends, and called an Uber to take us home. She cried the entire ride while I exchanged apologetic looks with the driver. Once we got home, I told her to sleep on the couch and that we would talk in the morning. She was still upset and said she was going to take an Ambien to sleep. I told her to do whatever she wanted and went into the bedroom. About 30 minutes later, while lying there processing how awful everything was and realizing I needed to leave the marriage, I suddenly sat up. She had been drinking a lot that night and had taken a sedative. I ran to the living room and tried to wake her, but she did not respond. She was breathing, but I could not wake her, so I called 911. About 5 or 6 minutes later, 5 firefighters and 2 police officers were in my living room, checking her vitals and preparing to take her to the emergency room. One firefighter looked me in the eye and said he sees people die this way all the time. The police questioned me and examined me for signs of a struggle, checking my fingernails and looking for scratches. It was uncomfortable, but the officer was kind and simply doing his job. I learned that the Ambien prescription was very old and from her ex-boyfriend, something to discover at 3 o'clock in the morning. They took her to the emergency room, and I followed the ambulance. Despite everything, I did not want her to die. I was still processing that night and the past 4 years of marriage and how the abuse had built to that moment. The closest way to describe it is like surfacing from deep underwater. I found out she was stable and recovering. Around 5 o'clock in the morning, I went home, played with my cats, and watched the sunrise. Edit 2. Thank you for the reflection. I had honestly blocked out parts of how that night ended. I can look back on it more clearly now. It was a terrible night, but it was also the beginning of the rest of my life. Story 2. Money would disappear from time to time, like as soon as I had saved enough for something important. I was very young and couldn't really say that he would do this to me, to us, when it seemed we were both working so hard toward big goals. The last straw was when another 2,000 stashes disappeared, and I wouldn't let it go. I demanded he tell me where it went, and he said, "If I don't want you to know something, you will never know." Story 3. When she just would not stop spending, it drove me nuts. The last bit was after I had taken family finances back over, gotten everything under control, rebuilt credit, and finally had things straightened out. No more utilities getting shut off, no more evictions. Hell, we were homeowners. I added her onto my longest held credit card with the explicit instructions that this was for building credit and emergencies, don't spend anything on it. 3 days later, I was notified that the card was over the halfway point. I tell her again to only use it in emergencies. A week later, it's maxed out. I started making plans then, but she beat me to it. I got a text. "I finally figured out what to get you for our anniversary. I hope it makes you happy." Surprise divorce papers served the next day. It took a year to finalize, during which time I moved 1,200 miles away, but still paid her house and car payments. She was awarded both, but specifically told she was responsible for the payments and had to pay me for my half of the equity in the house, and I had to make my payment to the state. 6 months later, the house is in foreclosure, the truck has been repaired, my credit is destroyed again, and she's begging me to fix it all. Unfortunately, I missed the part where my support offer was backdated to the filing date, so was immediately subjected to 600 weeks of withholding and can barely afford my own bills. She won't sign off on that, even for my equity in the house, so she's about to be homeless. Our daughter has already moved to be with me at Christmas, and I'll likely end up with the boys too. Everything I worked so hard for is gone now. Story 4. My stepmom called and told me that his much younger girlfriend's mom had messaged her on Facebook. The mom said that at Thanksgiving dinner, my husband had told everyone he was waiting for my dad to die of cancer before divorcing me so he could claim half of any inheritance. That year, he had stood me and the kids up for Thanksgiving at the last minute. He was supposed to bring groceries, and I had no car, so I ended up eating corn dogs in front of the TV with my 3- and 6-year-old. That was when I knew it was over. It became undeniably real. The next week, when the girlfriend's roommate kicked her out, and he told me she was moving in, that we were going to be a troop now. It took 2 or 3 days to process that he was serious. I then told him we were breaking up and that he needed to find somewhere else to stay. I was the sole breadwinner and we had small children. He said he wouldn't move and that if I left, he would not contribute to childcare or help in any way. I still had no car or license, but I moved out with the kids. We stayed in rundown hotel rooms for 5 weeks over Christmas, until I could secure an apartment. Story 5. He flipped out because I told him I was coming over, and then a couple of hours passed without me confirming. I just showed up at his house. We lived 10 minutes apart and spent basically every night together for 3 years, but this was apparently a huge deal. He said it was disrespectful and insulting that I hadn't given a second heads up. He acted really weird, yelled at me, got almost in tears, and then sulked for hours. After about 4 hours, I thought maybe we could move on. I even offered to leave, but of course it was deeper than that. This was the same guy who had abandoned me in a foreign country on vacation because I forgot to take my shoes off and stepped on the bath mat in an Airbnb. He bought a plane ticket and left 3 days before the trip ended. Now he was acting like I was causing him pain and anguish just by coming over when he didn't expect it. It was only 7:30 in the evening, and I had brought everything to make dinner. I couldn't believe how ridiculous he was. I woke up early the next morning, packed my things, and left. 3 years of straight-up abuse had led to this being the last straw. At first, when I said we should break up, he said, "Yeah, I've come to terms with the fact that we're just not compatible." But when he realized I wasn't going to argue or fight for him, he came to my house, got on the floor and cried, begging me, saying he wasn't even a man before he met me. He was 35 years old. What the hell? Story 6. I forget what prompted it, but we were having some playful back and forth when the topic of cheating came up. She suddenly got serious and said, "If I cheated on you, you would never know." Even though we lived together and my daily routine included dropping her off and picking her up from work, she was convinced I was cheating. Like when? On my lunch break? After we split, I realized a lot of it was projection. Still, that comment never sat right with me. Story 7. He started kiting checks all over town and got caught. I discovered a life insurance policy he had taken out on me, forging my signature, and I found out he was cheating. He planned to leave me and the kids with no car and in a house that was about to be foreclosed on. I had him served the following week. He cried when I made him take the house, but not that I was taking our children. Story 8. He shot a hole through 3 rooms of our house. The bullet lodged in drywall a couple feet above where my head would go during sleep. He had chronic pain, took opiates and sleeping pills, and mixed a few too many to remember what happened. I had been working on leaving and had actually started to move a few things out, but the accidental discharge that I found when I got home from work was the real motivator for getting out of there. Story 9. Years of alcoholism, severe untreated ADHD, probably some narcissism too. The first year was okay, the next 6 were bad. I tried so hard to help him and fix him, did literally everything for him, washed every dish and cooked every meal. Finally had enough people that cared about tell me how I wasn't in a great situation and got the hell out. That was 2 weeks ago. He's making it so much worse than necessary, but we have a daughter, so I just have to put up with it and ignore it for now. Best part is, I went out last night to enjoy an evening, saw one of his friends and he called me a whore. Story 10. I was at my brother-in-law's soccer game with my sister, someone my husband hadn't let me see in over a year. He knew where I was and who I was with, but he lost his mind when I wasn't home after he got off work, sending threatening texts and calls. I asked my sister and brother-in-law to follow me home. It turned out he had been sitting in his car nearby with the headlights off. He pulled out shortly after we did and followed us for miles, trying to ram my car and push it off the road. Story 11. When she spent $20,000 on our credit card without telling me while having an affair with her boss, then sold all of our things after I took the dog to stay at my mom's and moved in with a guy in New Jersey, that should have been the final straw. 3 months later, after no contact, her mother called to tell me she had ended up in Eastern Europe during a manic episode and that I needed to do something. That was the final straw after many other so-called final straws. She was officially diagnosed with bipolar 1 a few months later after years of me asking her to get evaluated. Although, in hindsight, it probably should have been when she gave my cat away while I was out of town for work for 2 days. To be fair, it was a Hemingway cat that only liked me and would bite anyone else. I had trained it to use the toilet with about a 70% success rate. With more time, I am confident we could have gotten that to 98%. Story 12. I was expected to go back to bed because she, on the couch, wanted to sleep in. That turned into another argument because I did not follow her whims again. I had already said, "One more senseless fight and I am gone." This was after 2 instances of physical abuse, both with witnesses. After 3 weeks of her refusing to take the medication, her doctor prescribed to stabilize her so she would not end up in the behavioral ward again. After a month of fighting almost every time we saw each other, except when she wanted me to buy her food. After 18 months of walking on eggshells to avoid setting her off. After years of lies and manipulation, I gave her far too many chances to change. I am not sorry to be done with her. Story 13. I went to therapy to sort out my issues. I suggested she go to therapy to address hers. I hoped we might also try couples counseling, but after her first session, she came out scoffing. She dismissed it after just 1 appointment. That day, as we walked out of our separate sessions together, I knew I was going to divorce her. Then she got pregnant. It took 2 years from that moment to finally end the marriage. Edit. Of course, I share responsibility for the pregnancies. I was young and foolish. I did not understand how marriage worked, let alone the importance of using 2 forms of birth control. My kids are out of high school now. It is old history. And if you asked my ex, she would say I was a horrible, emotionally abusive person. I am not looking for sympathy. I was immature, I was humbled, and I have grown. To further prove my youthful stupidity, the reason it took 2 years is that I got her pregnant again after our first child was born. By then we were both completely miserable in the marriage. I felt like I was the only one who could see it. I was not innocent. I was an a-hole at times. For every complaint I make about my ex, she could make an equally serious complaint about me. Story 14. Fought, not me but a close friend. His wife was 8 years older than him but acted like a senior citizen. He was like 30. She wouldn't go out with him or us anywhere because she didn't want to miss Jeopardy. Then she was always commenting that he would be happier with someone younger. He was actually quite happy, but it seemed she was always trying to push him away. One time when she did come with us to the bar, she was trying to hook him up with my wife's sister who had recently gone through a breakup, saying she would be perfect for him. Eventually they finally split up, but then she hired a private investigator to follow him for over a year to report on what he was doing and who he was seeing. She emailed me with her report and to ask me if there was any hope of them getting back together now that he has sowed his oats. The bish be crazy. Story 15. She cheated on me with her high school boyfriend. When I found out, I confronted her but she denied it. Later, she downplayed it, saying it shouldn't have happened but never apologized. She wanted to work through it together, but her idea of working through it was creating a new email address and sleeping with anyone who responded to her Craigslist ads. Story 16. While I was on a business trip, I found out she had left the kids alone, gone out and gotten drunk, crashed and totaled her minivan, and fled the scene. She was arrested, which triggered a child welfare investigation into our children. She then used our savings to buy the exact same minivan so I wouldn't notice, and had another man call child services from our house to vouch for her, saying she was a great mom and there was no reason to investigate. I had been gone for just 4 days. I only found out months later during one of my child's doctor appointments. Story 17. Wasn't married but recently broke up with her after she ruined a 10-year friendship I had with a girl because she suspected us of cheating on her. Note that we were long distance and I was over 2,000 kilometers away from my friend, who also lived in the same town as my then girlfriend. I'd shown her my entire chat logs and every communication I've ever had with my friend to prove there was nothing between us, but she would still tell me I was lying and hiding everything. I'd called my friend 3 times in the 16-month relationship with my partner and apparently that was too much. I wasn't allowed to see my friend when I'd flown down, even with my partner by my side because she kicked up a stink when we were outside my friend's house and made me choose between us two. She absolutely hated my friend for no reason besides her looks and would constantly make up scenarios about the two of us and refused to listen when I'd tell her that literally none of what she was saying would happen. As a result, I'd never talk about my friend to her, yet she would constantly bring her up in arguments all the time. It came to an end when my partner mentioned her in an argument, got so angry and threatened to break the windows of my friend's house, drove to her house and sent me a photo from outside her house. She refused to leave until I had sent a message to my friend that she wrote, and when I sent it, my friend blocked me on everything and a 10-year friendship down the drain. Then after I broke up with her, she would constantly tell me that I chose my friend over her, and that I always did. No, it's just not normal to threaten your partner with anything of those sorts, regardless of who it was. She is honestly crazy and would always find excuses when I'd tell her she needs therapy to heal from her traumas. I've had her blocked for about 2 weeks now and I'm always on edge because I hope she doesn't actually do something or fly to me to try do something. Story 18. He stole my credit card, maxed it out, and spent all the money on alcohol and drugs. 2 days later, he came home, passed out on the sofa, pissed himself, and then smashed a fist through the window. I was a full-time student with no money and completely terrified. It took every bit of courage I had to get him out of the house. That experience taught me a few important lessons. I am not responsible for someone else's mental health or their actions. Story 19. I always had a stable job, but she could never hold one for very long. When she wasn't working, we went into debt. When she did work, we slowly climbed out. Eventually, she said that because of her mental illnesses, she couldn't work anymore. Translation, she never wanted to work and now had an excuse. After years of this pattern, we finally hit the last straw. At least it was a mutual split. Without me as her cash cow, she had no choice but to focus on her mental health. We are both better off now. Story 20. Due to some childhood trauma, my ex equated sympathy with love. She would create situations and start drama to put herself in a sympathetic position. Every scenario was based on lies and manipulation. Everyone heard a different story depending on her victimization scenarios. After 6 years of being responsive to her demands, she called me at work one day with a fresh batch of BS and expected me to polish up my armor, mount my white stallion, and charge off to her rescue yet again to prove my love. Something in me simply broke and I was done. I realized she was a black hole of neediness. There was never going to be enough sympathy. Therapy wasn't helping. Medication wasn't helping. It was simply who she was. The veil had fallen, and there was nothing she or anyone else could do to put things together again. She's been married 3 times since our divorce, twice to the same dude. One husband had her committed to a psych hospital for 3 months. She's lost both children she gave birth to. She can't hold a job because her needy manipulations extend to all areas of her life. My father puts it best when he said, "She's piteous." Story 21. I was young and shallow. Looks like a trumped personality. He was beautiful, but possessive, jealous, and obsessive. He would call at all hours. He would show up at 3 a.m. just to see if anyone else was there, and other weird behavior. The kicker was when I had the flu, I was so sick, I just wanted to sleep. He called me 6 times in 30 minutes. I put the phone on silent and went to sleep. I woke up to the police banging on the door. The insecure jerk had the cops do a welfare check. After explaining the situation to them, the cops were irritated. They told me in front of him it would be a good idea to get a restraining order. I dumped him on the spot. I got the restraining order. He stalked me at work, called and texted me begging to take him back. He broke into my house once, showed up at my mom's job, and more. I had to move and get a new phone number. He eventually offed himself because his new girlfriend left him. I was so relieved. Mean, I know, but I was finally free of this weirdo. He taught me a life lesson about personality trumping looks. Never again have I dismissed the guys who weren't traditionally attractive. Story 22. When arguments happen more often than conversations, that's a dead giveaway. My situation became a problem because I second-guessed myself and my actions. Trust me, I'm not Prince Charming or anywhere near perfect. There are plenty of things I could have handled better. The last straw was an argument where she aggressively listed everything wrong with me. I don't do the dishes enough. I don't help with housework. I lie all the time. I probably cheated, or did I? My family are users. I don't earn enough money. My job is pathetic and I should get a real one. I only want to hang out with friends. I never pick the right show or movie when we eat. I'm horrible in bed and want intimacy too much, to an unhealthy degree. Finally, we should see a therapist or go to marriage counseling. So, I address the complaints. I do the dishes 3 to 5 days a week, just not immediately after dinner like she demands, because I leave for work shortly after. Whenever I try to sweep or clean the bathrooms, she says I'm doing it wrong, using the wrong broom, or that she was going to do it later. I suggested making a chore list, but she said I should just know what to do. I do lie sometimes, I admitted that. It feels easier to say I didn't grab lunch at McDonald's during work than to deal with the yelling for spending money without her approval. As for cheating, I almost wish I had, but I didn't. I'm not good with people or relationships, let alone a one-night stand. Despite constant accusations, I've been faithful through all the years. Things have gone downhill. When she says my family are users, that's mostly true. A family member hasn't been to our place in nearly a decade. She still brings up negative things from when we were 18 to 22. She isn't entirely wrong, and we already distanced ourselves from them. At work, I made good money, but the hours were terrible. I'm the only earner in the house and often work 2 jobs to handle life's hurdles. She criticizes me for taking out a loan to get a degree. It's $50 a month, and I'm not currently working in that field. It feels like salt in the wound. For context, I worked for a Fortune 500 company, doing borderline paralegal work. As for friends, I've never been very social. Once every 3 to 4 months, a coworker would invite me to a superhero movie. His wife doesn't enjoy them, and mine doesn't want to go with me. We would alternate paying for tickets and snacks. Somehow, that means I spend too much time with friends. It doesn't make sense to me. About picking the right show, we usually eat dinner with the television on, and I often go to work afterward. I try not to start something I'll get invested in, but she insists I choose. She wants me to pick something only she likes and hasn't seen before, every single night. When I tried, nothing I chose was right, and it turned into belittling criticism. So, I stopped picking, and she complained more. Now I either eat in another room or take something small to work like a granola bar. Yes, I'm apparently the problem there too. The comments about being horrible in bed and wanting intimacy too much hit me hard. We hadn't had issues before, but we also haven't been intimate in a long time. She said the man should initiate, but that didn't work, so I started asking directly instead of risking upsetting her. Married or not, no means no. She said no every time, so I stopped asking and stopped trying. Finally, therapy or marriage counseling? I tried to set up a time and day. She rejected almost every suggestion. I said plainly that it was her idea and I just needed a time and day. She ended it by saying it wasn't marriage counseling we needed. It was therapy, but only for me. So yes, apparently the problem is me. Story 23. I was in the Navy. She wanted me to live on the ship and she would stay in our apartment and keep my truck because I wouldn't need it. A month later, I got orders to go to another duty station. She wanted to stay in Norfolk and have me send her all but $100, pay all the bills and give her all the rest to live on. Yes, she was cheating on me. She was also cheating on the guy she was cheating on me with. Nope, I told her that the Navy paid me to move and if she wanted to stay, she was on her own. 20-some-odd years later, she told me she had been diagnosed as being bipolar. She really was crazy. Story 24. This happened in my early 20s. I married very young. The first red flag was when I found a recording device on top of the kitchen cabinets. When I confronted him, he claimed it was for security. I was shocked that he had installed something without my knowledge and hidden it. I only discovered it because I had decided to clean up. The second red flag took me a few instances to notice. He would randomly show up at places I was, supposedly by coincidence. The last straw came after my university classes, when I walked to my car and found him parking right next to it. That day terrified me. I realized he was stalking me and acting psychotically. I discovered he had placed a tracking device in my car. I asked for a divorce after that. If you've seen the Netflix show You, he had some of that behavior but not quite as extreme. Story 25. When his mommy told him she needed him to return to MX to give his sister away. Meanwhile, I newly arrived in the US, 2 kids under 6, working at a Mexican restaurant, and I hated every second of it. But no, it was more important for him to miss his visa interview to return home to give his sister away, even though their brother was back in the village and could do that just fine. Story 26. I was at work when my company hired a new analyst. I was also an analyst at the time, so my senior director asked me to mentor her and teach her our systems. I was excited and told my ex about it. She was extremely jealous of other women. I should have known that mentioning any woman other than my mom would trigger a rage. Ironically, she had cheated on every boyfriend she had before me. I think she was afraid I would do the same. She called me repeatedly at work. I declined the calls and texted to ask why she was blowing up my phone. She responded with a stream of anger, accusing me of planning to sleep with the new analyst and cheat on her. I had met this coworker 30 minutes earlier and was simply assigned to mentor her. Somehow that meant I was going to betray her. When I asked how that made sense, she said, "I don't know, it just does." In that moment, I realized that if she was this insecure and willing to disrupt my workday over something so minor, marriage or children would only make it worse. I ended the relationship by text. I could not handle the chaos anymore, the verbal and physical abuse, the constant jealousy and the rage. Story 27. He had untreated ADHD. When he got upset, he would smack himself in the face. I never saw that before we got married. I remember trying to talk to him during one of his episodes and he turned to me with a creepy smile and said, "You haven't seen anything yet." That and the fact he was addicted to gambling and cleaned out our trom, at least it was small emergency fund, promised he'd stop, repeat. Story 28. A neighbor who we'd pay to mow our lawn came by and she answered the door with bare bottom half. She'd been civilly committed before and had been having a number of weird episodes ranging from her acting like a scared child, being catatonic or being violent, so I asked her for my feeling of safety, if she could chill in the bedroom for 20 minutes until whatever passed. 5 minutes later, I hear her screaming for help and rush in to find that for some reason she decided to try to jump out the window head first with about a 6-foot drop into a really prickly bush to escape being locked in the bedroom because she was too out of it to open a door and thought that meant I locked a door that had no lock on it. Fortunately, she got caught halfway through and I was able to pull her back in, but then she immediately started attacking me and I could barely keep myself safe while pushing her on the bed so I could get distance between us. I ended up arranging a trip down to her dad's for her with some mutual friends so we could both have some space. My breaking point, though, was 2 days later when we were talking about reconciling, and I was saying she needed to take her meds, but then she insisted she didn't need to, and that she wouldn't want to get back together until I admitted all the times she'd physically assaulted me were justified, that I'd worked with police to forge the 911 recordings and police reports to gaslight her. I finally kind of accepted there was no way for me to help her when she'd had her paranoia turn towards me, so I said we should just split. Sadly, this was not the end though, as about 3 weeks later, she managed to convince some idiot to try to off me. Story 29. She would get completely drunk on a Saturday night, throwing dishes and raging, then go to church the next morning and raise her hands in worship as if nothing had happened. It felt hypocritical. She was a volatile, abusive alcoholic who wanted to be seen as a model Christian. I did not just leave her, I also stopped going to church entirely, and I have never been happier. Story 30. He began stalking people for no reason. In the week before I left, he set up hidden cameras in his mom's house and rented a car so he could sit outside and see what was going on. His mom was a kind, honest widow. There was no reason he could not have simply asked her if something was wrong. That same week, someone wrote, "Go away, gentrifiers," in marker on a window outside our condo building. It was minor vandalism, but he said he had researched paying for a billboard to post a screenshot from the security footage. He also said he would sit outside every bar in the neighborhood to track down whoever did it. Even a year after leaving, I still worry that I am being watched or that he has somehow planted devices to monitor me. Story 31. Do the things you ignored or refused to acknowledge count? They refused to talk about finances because it gave them anxiety. As someone who has dealt with anxiety for years, I tried to be supportive, but it never led anywhere productive. They said they hated kids and hated cats. With distance, I began to understand what that level of disdain can suggest about someone's empathy and compassion. They cared more about how others perceived them than about the values or actions that actually defined them. There was no nurturing side to their personality. If you were struggling or growing through something, they saw it as failure. They also chased obvious health fads, like drinking maple syrup and cayenne pepper to cleanse toxins, and believed that the secret held the solution to all their problems. Finally, they convinced themselves that going outside the marriage for sex would somehow help the relationship. Story 32. Retrospective pathological jealousy after childbirth. It got harder and harder, her first trying to isolate me from friends and family and not bring any of hers into our life more than once, not letting me sleep while I had to work the next day because of ubiquitous questions regarding my past relationships. I did home office as much as possible. I bought childcare so she can recover and do her things. I was sole breadwinner. Let me do all the chores in the evening, including cooking and taking care of our child in the evening, but won't accept if we didn't do trips on the weekends, so I could catch up with cleaning. Beat our child for screaming and behaving very cold if the child didn't show love towards her. When I was at work, she came to my workplace and made a scene because I didn't answer the messages immediately. Last straw was when she told me I was cheating because I said I would go to the office the next day because she did not let me work the morning. She didn't want to watch our child because I was using the phone on the toilet. She provoked me with destroying more of my things, as she already had before, and I got angry and we had a violent fight. She destroyed more things, and I locked myself and the child in our sleeping room, and the next morning, when she was asleep, I abducted the child to a different country because where we lived, mothers default get care for the child if there is domestic violence. Story 33. I just wanted one more day away from her. She was controlling, insecure, but also smart. We only dated for a couple of months, but she controlled every aspect of my life. I couldn't talk to my friends, game with them, or have any interactions outside of family because she wanted all of my attention. I had to be by her side and also eat sleep when she did. She suffered from depression, so she always slept at odd hours and expected me to lay beside her, so I had to try adapting to the same sleep schedule as her. From the start, we had one day where we weren't together. On that day, I could game, clean my place up, mow the lawn, go to a movie, anything I normally did before meeting her. I tolerated it because she was the first woman I dated after losing my first wife. So being with the same person for over 14 years, you're not sure what to do and will take anything at first glance. I found out later I was still grieving a little bit, so I was more tolerant of abuse than I normally would have been. Anyways, I told her I wanted another break day. Her counter-argument was actually giving up the existing break day because we were a couple now and should dedicate 100% of our time to each other. I pointed out the things I liked doing on my break day and I couldn't do those when she's over my shoulder or wanted to be involved in them directly. She didn't see eye to eye on that and thought there was nothing wrong with it, and it led to an argument where she was showering tears and throwing stuff at me. That was it. Next day I dumped her and she didn't take it lightly. Story 34. I had been feeling really bad, not eating, not sleeping for weeks. She planned a fancy weekend in Tahoe, which I was not into, but it would make her happy, so I said I would drive because she didn't have her license after 4 years of me asking her to get it. She was in the room that Friday evening when a psychologist diagnosed me with depression and told me not to attempt the 5-hour drive. The only thing she had to say afterward was, "Why are you doing this to me? If you just took better care of yourself, you could drive us to Tahoe for the weekend." That pretty much cemented my decision not to have kids with that woman. Reminded me too much of my mom. Story 35. I made the mistake of marrying a woman who had trauma from being cheated on unexpectedly after 8 years of marriage. Although she hid it at first, she got progressively more jealous as the marriage went on. She would drink and then started going through my phone and accusing me of having long conversations with girls. These girls were Tracy and Stacy, both old military buddies, men I have known for 20+ years. The problem is, she would forget because she was drinking, and the cycle would continue in a few months with her seeing Tracy or Stacy on my phone and getting jealous again. A few cycles of that and I was done. I was out of that house the next day for 2 hours. Story 36. He was unreachable for days while in a foreign country. I contacted the US Embassy, his Airbnb host, and was in touch with the local police. I genuinely thought he was dead until I got a casual phone call from him at the airport. When I asked what had happened, he said he was too exhausted to discuss it right then. After arguing about me not picking him up, I stupidly caved and went to get him. Of course, we fought about where he had been. When I asked what drugs he had been on, he said, "That's none of your business." I had spent days in a full-blown panic, crying and distraught, and that's not his business? That was the moment I informed him that our marriage was over. Story 37. I knew it was over when my mom told me she was 90% sure he was cheating on me. This was at my graduation from boot camp, by the way, and I didn't care. It was like, oh, cool, whatever. But the moment I was like, screw it, was when he spent $600+ at a liquor store, then tried to lie and say he didn't do it even though the credit card company had faxed me a receipt showing his signature on it. Then when he finally did admit to it, he was like, what about that $20 flat iron you bought? I immediately got off the phone with him, called the bank to move my paycheck to a new account, and then called a divorce lawyer. Story 38. I was into a girl at work, and we went on several dates. There were a lot of red flags before this, mostly her trying to tell stories that made her seem cool, like a one-upper type of situation, which I had kinda blew off because I figured she was just nervous or something. But then she told me how, when she lived in New Mexico, she and her friends would basically kidnap homeless Native Americans, beat them up, and drop them off way across town or in the middle of nowhere. I guess my face said it all because she tried to backtrack and justify it by saying how all New Mexicans hated Native Americans and I wouldn't understand how terrible they are. I'm not ashamed to say that I got a new job and just ghosted her. Story 39. I feel confident enough to post here. There were several things that were added up. 1. I no longer wanted to go back home. I wanted to stay out as long as possible. The home seemed like a foreign place to me. 2. Always threatening me with divorce all the time, even upon the first fight that happened days after the marriage. Coming at me with a knife during the fights, threatening to hurt me and throwing objects around and smashing things. The third time was the last straw. I told her I had enough. It was over. I realized she had issues, and I don't think I was the problem. The person proceeded to go on Reddit, post her narrative, and people said, yeah, what you did was wrong, but it sounds like you're being gaslighted and he probably deserved it. I hope you're okay. Which she proceeded to show me to say that maybe I'm the problem. Those were the big things, but there were so many smaller things, like constantly going through my stuff because she thought I was cheating on her, threatening to hurt herself and call the police on me, constantly telling me I was at fault. Goes on and on. It's over, and I'm now much, much happier. Story 40. Mine is way less interesting than most of these. I just couldn't have a single conversation with the woman without it being a conflict of some kind. Every single thing, from what do you want to eat tonight, to more in-depth discussions about the kids or bills, always became a fight. She was usually taking swings at me that were completely unnecessary. She was incredibly impulsive and bought a car with a nearly $800 a month payment that we couldn't afford, and that didn't help either. Story 41. Thankfully, we were not married, but we had been together for a while. Things were totally normal at first, but toward the end he got really into conspiracy theories, stuff like Bush did 9/11, or Obama is a racist crap. At first I ignored it, but it kept escalating. He spent all his time online, reading and believing everything he saw. The final straw came at a museum with a Holocaust exhibit, full of video footage and photos. Lots of very tangible evidence. We were looking at a famous photo of a man holding a crate full of wedding rings and he said, "You know it's not real, right? There's no way Hitler could have known what was going on in the camps. There's zero evidence he ever spoke out against Jews." I was shocked. We were surrounded by evidence. Then he added, "The Jews made it up to get sympathy so they could get away with whatever they want." That was it. That was too far. Story 42. I went to see a doctor after losing 2 pregnancies back to back, and there wasn't any reason why I should have lost them. She asked me what was going on at home, and I was so tired that I told her everything. She told me that she was worried about my safety and that if I wasn't going to leave, I at least needed to call for security forces the next time he acted in his typical way. She said the reason I lost the babies was most likely because of the stress I was going through. It was the first time someone validated me, that what was happening wasn't my fault, and that even though when he got violent he didn't leave bruises, it didn't mean it wasn't abuse. Story 43. Honestly, not as bad as some here, but we had a long-distance relationship first. Budget was tight when she came to live with me in my country. We had food, a roof over our heads, and could do small things in a month. After 3 months, she said she felt like a prisoner. I didn't keep her in our apartment. She stayed indoors all the time while I was working. Also, visiting family was too much, once a month. Meanwhile, my parents and siblings were nothing but kind to her. So she divorced because she lacked independence and freedom. After 4 or 5 years of long distance, I wonder how much of that was real. Story 44. My brother married a crazy. We didn't suspect anything because she was nice with our family and loved to cook together, other than we found it odd that she didn't let my brother come home once in a while. Like she didn't want him to not come back home visiting or anything at all. Until recently, my brother spilled the beans after 4 years of marriage. She terminated 2 or 3 of her pregnancies because she was mad at him for not following her rules. My brother managed to save 2 children just because he did follow her rules, one of them not coming home at all. Domestic violence happened within their marriage. She threw chairs at my brother, talked badly about him and my family to her family for no reason, broke things, drained my brother's savings because she wanted to live lavishly, and didn't give the children food if my brother pissed her off even slightly. We asked him to divorce her because he had to work 3 jobs now, but it's not easy when they already had children together. Story 45. We weren't married, but one night my ex-girlfriend and I were leaving a restaurant at closing time. She was drunk at the time, had 5 drinks the entire date, and asked a stranger if she could give him a tarot reading. It was 10 p.m. and everyone was gone. I told her I was tired and we should go, but she insisted she must do this. So for 10 minutes, I sat uncomfortably by her as she gave this guy a reading. The dude was weird and had just gotten out of prison. Story 46. Yeah, my ex was playing pro hockey in Canada, and we were long distance as I was in Boston. He lived in Boston outside of season. He kept liking girls' pictures from 100+ weeks back, clearly to get their attention. I told him it made me uncomfortable, and he said, if I'm told not to do something, I'm going to do it more. I broke up with him that day. He continued to stalk me for years, sending me pictures of my street sign at night. Oh, his mom also asked me if he was nice to me while we were dating, and I should have taken that as a red flag. Story 47. My mother had the audacity to give our child, her grandchild, over-the-counter children's cold medicine, followed by a 3-day diatribe about GMOs and homeopathy. Once the yelling stopped, she tried to explain how my mother was poisoning our child with cold medicine. Never mind the fact it was a common cold, and my kid went to sleep and felt better the next day. You would have thought my mother was literally injecting her grandchild with giga cancer. That's pretty much when the whole crunchy mom thing ran its course, and I was done. Story 48. I was trying to console my 4-year-old, who had just been through a scary experience, while also taking apart a door handle and mechanism that was in the center of this scary experience. Rather than offer help for either of the things I was trying to do, he was barking orders at me, telling me why the mechanism was broken, incorrectly, because the parts he claimed were broken aren't even in the mechanism, and how I should be fixing it. I calmly finished taking the door handle apart, picked up my daughter and told him I was going to my mom's, giving him 30 minutes to pack a bag and move back home with his mother. That was the end of 7 years of relentless mental and emotional abuse, which continued for another 4 years despite being separated, divorced. Story 49. We weren't married, we were just dating. It wasn't that she was crazy, she was a pathological liar. Everyone knew it, and I knew it before I met her. It didn't bother me because her lies were mostly harmless, and aside from that, she was fun to be around and great in bed. Then she somehow convinced my brother's fiancé that when she came over, I would get her stoned and my brother would take advantage of her. She claimed it happened not once, but multiple times. None of it was true. My brother wanted nothing to do with her. He was polite but completely devoted to his fiancé. I did not do drugs, nor would I provide them to anyone, and I would never allow anyone to take advantage of someone impaired. I don't know how she even knew my brother's fiancé, but if she did, she should have known my girlfriend was a pathological liar. Despite that, my brother's fiancé, 6 months pregnant, believed her and broke up with him. He was devastated. It took a few weeks, but I convinced my brother's fiancé that it was complete nonsense. Even though they got back together, the damage was done. After that, my girlfriend constantly feared he would cheat. I never confronted her. She had enough sense not to return to the neighborhood and eventually started dating someone else. This was before cell phones, so avoiding contact was easy. Story 50. I was trying to leave my marriage, feeling terribly guilty and mixed up. He kept saying he couldn't live without me. One day he called and said he had been diagnosed with a fatal illness. I was in pieces. Fortunately, we had the same doctor and I called her. She couldn't discuss anything about him, but she said enough that I knew he was lying. That was the last straw. I moved on with a much clearer mind. Story 51. I went through a 10-year span of losing things, not just an ink pen here or there, but important items. An angel figurine I'd hand-painted, notebooks full of stories, a locked box of trinkets from my childhood, and my wallet with ID, SS card, bank card, and checkbook. In 2009, while replacing these items, I inquired at each relevant office about replacements. Following paperwork and memories, I realized this was happening every year around tax season. A few months later, while deep cleaning the bathroom, I found my most recently lost wallet in her tampon box. When I asked her, she said, "Well, you must have put it there." Long story short, she had been stealing our joint tax return the entire time we were married and spending it on herself instead of our children, hiding it by eliminating my access to the account. Story 52. Not married, but common lawyers. I was putting her through university, and she was absolutely daft with technology, using an old word processor from the early 90s, the highest tech she could handle. When we first started dating, I was doing dead-end jobs, but she convinced me I was the smartest computer repair person alive and encouraged that path. By the time we broke up, I was senior technical at our biggest local ISP. One day, I got a random email from a woman claiming she wanted to meet me for more than coffee, with a great career. At this point, our relationship had become distant. Her school friends kept telling her to do better, even though I was funding her selfless education. We hadn't been physical in almost a year due to what was described as a hormone imbalance on her side. I was puzzled. I checked the message headers. It came from my ISP at her best friend's place, and the email arrived while she was visiting. I responded with interest, telling the new prospect about her excuses and my frustration. 2 days before the planned meeting, she broke down angry and confessed she had been sending the emails. I told her I knew and gave her an envelope detailing how betrayed I felt. I explained that my entire career path was based on a lie she told years ago, and that if she thought she could challenge me in my domain, she had made the worst mistake. She gave me the shocked Pikachu face. I said, "I did. Now get out of my apartment and go live with your friend." They came back with police to get their stuff, and stole part of my wardrobe, cutlery, and other items with police support. They tried to smooth things over for 3 months, but I wasn't having it. You don't admit to being an idiot with technology and then challenge someone in the realm of technology and expect to come out on top. I ignored so many red flags, but this one nearly suffocated me. Story 53. It built up over the course of a year. The last straw came when I was preparing to sell my truck. Winter was approaching, which is the slow season for my work. I asked my wife if it would make sense for us to use one vehicle over the winter and focus on paying down debt. I was covering both car payments, insurance, medical bills, rent, and everything else. Her response was, "So we are just going to add miles to my Jeep?" The brand new Jeep I had bought her less than a year earlier. We had only been married a little over a year. That was when I had enough. I told her I wanted a divorce. I felt she was selfish, narcissistic, and manipulative, and I could not live like that anymore. I was mentally exhausted and felt completely used. I filed for divorce and put her on a plane back to her home state 5 days later. I packed up all her belongings. That was 6 months ago. I have not heard from her in months after threatening a restraining order due to non-stop emails, including to my work account, along with constant texts and calls at all hours. I hope she is doing well. I loved her, and part of me still does. I truly wish her the best. It is sad that it did not work out. I believed we had found our person and would stay happy and best friends until the end. But expectations and reality do not always align. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.